saying that you're going to start? Yes, amazing. Okay. All right. Hello, ladies. Welcome to our lunch and learn on happy habits. So, we are going to rattle through quite a lot of content in this time that we've got together. We might have to make some decisions. It might be a bit like one of those interactive storybooks where we sort of choose the direction of travel at some point if we're running out of time. So I might give you a couple of options and you can pop your answers in the chat because I've got so much that I want to talk to you about. But let's get cracking. So, my name is Carly Cannings, and I am founder of the Happy Business School. This is me. This is my world. So, I live in Bristol with my husband Matthew and my 6-year-old daughter Jessica. In a previous life, I was a solicitor, so I had a very kind of traditional corporate life for most of my career. But in 2018, I had my daughter, and about 6 weeks after my daughter was born, I got rheumatoid arthritis, which is a chronic autoimmune condition. So motherhood and sort of the entry into motherhood and maternity leave didn't look quite like what I thought it was going to look like. Instead of those kind of, strolls in the park and coffees with friends, I was at having blood tests and living at my rheumatologist's hospital. Um, and actually, it's a really, really tricky time. But thankfully, I got some really great medical care, some really amazing drugs, made me feel a lot better. But actually, one of the biggest impacts wasn't the physical symptoms, it was that psychological impact of being diagnosed in my mid-30s with this chronic, unpredictable condition. But anyway, I got on with it as we do as mothers, and I went back to my job part-time, tried to do the whole part-time juggle, working 3 days a week. And the organization I worked for just didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know what to do with a person in a pretty senior leadership role, as I was by that point, trying to juggle 3 days working a week. I was presented with a whole new team when I or my first day back. So it was a really kind of rocky journey. But actually, all things happen for a reason. And actually, it was my wake up call probably to realize that my corporate days were over. So fast forward, I worked with an amazing career coach who helped me see the next vision, the next stage of my career. I realized that I loved working with people, helping people thrive, bringing the best out in teams. And I decided to make the leap from my lovely, comfortable corporate career to launch the Happy Business School. And what a roller coaster it's been. So that was just over 3 years ago. And here are some of the things I've done along the way. So I've been on ITV Evening News, I've been on BBC Radio Bristol talking about happiness at work. I've been to Downing Street. I've given evidence to the employment to the House of Commons on the Employment Rights Bill. These are some of the amazing clients that I've worked with. And really, my passion is simply about making workplaces happier and helping to create successful, people-centric workplaces where happy people thrive at work. So I mainly work with organizations, but obviously lots of the stuff I teach and I educate them about is about kind of developing their personal toolkit for being more joyful at work. And that stuff that I spend all my time talking to teams and organizations about absolutely applies to us as small business owners. So when I work with organizations, I take a two-stage approach. I look at equipping the individuals within that organization with the tools and techniques they need to gain or perhaps regain control of their happiness. And then I work with leaders to help them think about the type of culture that they're creating and helping them create an intentionally people-centric culture where everyone is encouraged to thrive. So we are very much in that left-hand space today because we're looking at the tools that we can use as small business owners to invest in our own happiness. But why does this stuff matter? Just in case you needed any convincing, there is loads of science that backs up why it matters that we're happy. Some of these on the screen you might think are obvious and you know about, things like being more productive, less likely to burn out. But actually maybe some of the more surprising ones are that we're more creative when we're happy. So that doesn't necessarily mean in an artistic sense, but actually we think more laterally. Our brains can think more creatively, and therefore we can overcome challenges and adversity more easily. And actually, one of the really surprising ones is that we are more accurate and analytical when we're happy. So they did some research with a group of doctors. They primed doctors before they went in and did an assessment to reach a diagnosis on a pretend patient. And they primed them by giving them videos to watch. And then they gave one group videos that would make them feel quite sad and depressed. They gave one some neutral content. And then the other group, they primed them by making them watch really joyful, happy content. And the people who'd watched the happy content reached their diagnostic conclusion quicker than any other group. So that's, maybe one of the less well-known benefits of being happy. Our brain just works better in so many more ways. And actually, we tend to think of happiness as being something that sort of happens around us, or that there are lots of external factors that influence our happiness. But actually, 90% of our long-term happiness is determined by internal factors. Some of that is genetics, but a lot of that is things like mindset. And it's really important that as we go through this, that we realize that we're far more in control of our happiness than we often think we might be. So, and a really important message. I've got a couple of kind of sort of ground rules, if you like, to cover with you just before we go into the really sort of meaty content. Happiness is a journey, not a destination. So we tend to think so we fall into a trap of using language like I'm looking for happiness and trying to find happiness, like it's this utopic place that we're going to end up one day. And we all probably realize that that's not going to happen. And actually, the brain is really, really quite sneaky sometimes. So when we have an idea of what success looks like, the closer we get to that success, the more our brain morphs what success looks like. So it's always just out of reach. And it's very similar with happiness. We think we know what happiness means, and we spend all our time trying to kind of get to this state. Whereas actually, we just need to enjoy the journey. We just need to look for those small moments and enjoy the ride and know that there is no utopic state at the end of the road. And while we're on sort of health warnings, optimists still wear seatbelts. So what this means is when we're talking about thinking about things more positively, trying to adopt a more positive mindset, this doesn't mean that we're going to be blindly optimistic. It doesn't mean that we still or that we don't need to see risks. We still need to have a real view of the world. It's just trying to look at that with a slightly more positive slant. And the way that I explain building that toolkit is that you need cash in the bank and change in your pocket. And you're probably going, what on earth is she going on about? But let me explain to you. So in day-to-day life, we need cash in the bank. So to pay for our mortgages, our food bills, our clothes, our holidays, whatever it is, we need to have cash in the bank. And we build up that cash in the bank over time. We deposit small amounts, often, and we grow that up so it's there when we need to draw on it. But sometimes that cash in the bank doesn't cut it in the moment. And there are becoming fewer and fewer of these analogies that I can draw on. But for example, if you go to a charity bake sale that doesn't have a card machine, you might have all the money you want in the bank, but unless you've got a fiver in your pocket, is no go. A pound for the supermarket trolley. So sometimes you're going to have all the cash in the bank that you need, but what you need in the moment is a little bit of change in your pocket. And the way that this relates to happiness is the cash in the bank is that long-term investment, those ways that we can train our brain to see things more positively. The change in your pocket bit is whilst you're building up those reserves, and even once you've built up those reserves, you might still need something in the moment to get yourself out of a funk. So you might need something to just change the mood music. And we're going to look at a few of those ideas as well as building up that long-term reserve. So this is the pyramid of positivity. So lots of these principles come from an amazing book called The Happiness Advantage, which was written by an American guy called Sean Acorn. And he looks at really what the building blocks of happiness are. And it's a really great book if you love neuroscience and psychology, because it explains lots of the science that goes on behind this stuff. And this is my kind of approach, that when we understand what's going on in our brain, we start to feel a little bit more in control. We start realizing, oh, my brain's doing this in this situation because that's what it's been trained to do, but I can just guide it this way. So if we look at those building blocks from the top clockwise, we've got relationships, learning from failure, recognition and encouragement, mindset, habits, and circle of control. And we're going to rattle through a few of those. We probably won't have time to do all of them. And that's where your kind of storybook decision making might come into play. But we're certainly going to have a look at mindset because that really wraps around and underpins lots of them. And we're definitely going to finish with habits because I think lots of this stuff, the real magic comes when you understand how to make some of these changes habitual, and we'll see where we go in the middle. But let me start with mindset. So when I do this activity with sort of teams in organizations, I'm not going to get you to do it today because I know some of you are having your lunch. But what I get people to do is I get them to close their eyes and sing over and over the lyrics to Row, Row, Row Your Boat. And they all think I'm absolutely bonkers at this point. And they're like, yeah, we were skeptical about getting the happiness lady in because we thought she might have us doing silly things like this. So I get them to close their eyes, I tell them when to start, and I get them to repeat the lyrics of Row, Row, Row Your Boat over and over and over again until I tell them to stop. Then I get them to open their eyes and tell me how long they've been singing for. And the answers range. The shortest I've had is somebody the other day told me they thought it was less than 30 seconds, while someone in the same room told me that they thought it was at least 2 minutes. The answer is that it's 70 seconds. So lots of people do get around the minute mark, but very often I'll get that sort of similar range. So going from 30 seconds up to 2 minutes. And the reason that I do that exercise is a reminder that reality is fixed, but our perception of that reality is within our control. And what's happening in that little experiment is that the people who give the short answers, who think that they haven't been singing for very long, that give the 30, 40-second answers, are probably having a lovely time. They're probably feeling really relaxed. They're probably grateful to have a break from me wittering on, and they're probably in a really relaxed state of mind. And therefore, that 70 seconds feels much shorter. Conversely, on the other end of the scale, the people who think it's 2 minutes more are probably feeling a little bit uncomfortable. They might be feeling a little bit silly, sat there with their eyes closed, repeating row, row, row your boat. So they're probably, that 70 seconds feels like it's been stretched, like it's much longer. But it's a really important reminder that the reality is fixed, but our perception is what is within our control. The same if you've ever been stuck in a traffic jam and you feel totally frustrated by that traffic jam. The traffic jam is the reality. Our perception of it, if we feel like the world's conspiring against us, why now when I'm trying to get to this really important meeting? Don't they know I need to be here? Of all the days for this to happen, that kind of narrative will form our perception of the situation, and we'll probably end up feeling irritated and angry. Those stress hormone levels, your cortisol levels are feeling raised. However, if you adopt a different mindset of that reality and you think, well, there's absolutely nothing I can do about this situation, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to put my favorite song on, I'm going to turn the radio up, and I'm just going to try and detach myself from this situation and accept that what will be will be. Your cortisol levels are going to drop. You're probably going to feel a lot more relaxed. You'll feel it in your body that you're feeling less tense. And that situation, again, the reality is fixed, but it's our perception that we are in control of. And that's where a technique called reframing comes in. And reframing, I'm sure lots of you have heard about reframing, but it's just that ability to look at things differently, to look at things through a different lens. And a really powerful example of reframing was when Barack Obama was elected as the first Black president back in 2008. Psychologists thought this was a really poignant moment and they wanted to look at the psychological impact of such a significant historical event. So they took a group of students, Black students and white students, and they tested their academic ability. This was before the election, before Obama was in office. And the white students outperformed the Black students. Once Obama was in office, they repeated the experiment again, and that gap closed. And the reason they concluded that that gap had closed was because those students' perception of their own ability had been so altered by seeing someone that looked like them in the ultimate position of power that it had an impact on their academic ability. So if you ever needed any convincing of the power of reframing, then, what a great one. But how do we do that? Because it's all well and good knowing that, but how do we actually get our brains to do that reframing more easily? Well, we employ another psychological tool, which is priming. We can prime ourselves for happiness. So if you've ever played the video game Tetris, you'll know what I'm talking about. So researchers have discovered that people who play Tetris start seeing the world as Tetris blocks. So they've played so much Tetris, they go to the supermarket and they want to close those gaps between the cereal boxes. They look at a skyscraper skyline and they want to turn the skyscrapers on their side to fill in all the gaps. They start seeing the world in blocks because they've been primed to do so. Equally, if you've ever bought a new car and done some research into a particular make or model, now you may have never noticed that make and model of car before, and then suddenly you can't walk through the supermarket, you can't drive down the motorway without seeing cars just like yours, just like the one you've bought, just like the one that you're thinking about buying, because we've put that image front and center of our mind and we absorb it so much more easily. A little one you can do if you're in a room where there are lots of different colors, if you're in a room where they're in a sort of quite colorful room, you can close your eyes and you can think really deeply and visualize a particular color. And then when you open your eyes, you will spot everything in that room that is that color. They will just pop out at you. And again, this is that technique of priming. It's putting something front and center of our mind to make it more accessible. And the way that we do this in terms of happiness is we lean into the joyful moments in life and we imprint those images on our brain so that they're more available to us. And just like the Tetris blocks, just like the cars, just like the colors, we start seeing the joy in life in Technicolor. So ways you can do this, you can do things like practicing gratitude. So actually thinking really actively about the things that you're grateful for. This doesn't need to be big, grand statements. It could be tiny, tiny little things. It could be that you walked somewhere and you felt the warmth of the sunshine on your skin. It can be tiny, tiny little things. I love this one as a dinner time activity. So if you're sat around the dinner table, you can all say something that you're grateful for that day. A great way to instill this stuff with your kids as well. Practicing acts of kindness is great. Sometimes it feels a bit kind of, oh, should I do that or shouldn't I do that? We have that moment, and I talk about sort of directional arrows, and we always have a choice of kindness. So whatever situation we're in, as challenging as that may be, we always have a choice to meet it with kindness. So, when that person is taking forever at the supermarket checkout and you really need to get going, we have a choice in that moment. We can either meet that moment with frustration or we can meet it with kindness. It is our choice. And the more that we choose to meet things with kindness, the more natural that becomes because we hardwire that pattern in our brain. So we can do things to kind of kickstart this. We can do things like writing three good things down that happened in the last 24 hours. And the science shows if you focus in that immediate 24-hour period, it's more impactful than looking further back. And again, these don't have to be big things. Journaling three times a week for 20 minutes, you might think that that's too much. So, do it once a week. Start small, and we'll talk about how we can make some of these things habitual when we come to the habit section. So we can do some other things to prime. I've talked already about gratitude and kindness. We can find opportunities to be mindful. So one of the kind of barriers to feeling joyful and happy is stress, and having high cortisol levels is a real blocker, as I'm sure you all know, to being joyful. So what we can do is try and find little moments during the day where we can lower those cortisol levels. So we're busy, busy, busy mums, business owners, dashing here, there, and everywhere. And those cortisol levels can have a tendency to kind of increase, and stay high during the day. And what kind of finding moments of mindfulness can do can just lower those levels so that when we then carry on with our day, our levels aren't as high. We're not drowning in it. We're constantly kind of bringing it down to make space for it to come back up. And, being mindful can literally mean looking out the window while the kettle's boiling instead of scrolling on your phone. It's as simple as finding those tiny, tiny little moments where you can just go, where you can just exhale, where you can just lower your shoulders. A lovely one that I heard, it was an Instagram video about beauty. But the way that the person was describing putting on her moisturizer, I was like, what a great opportunity for mindfulness. So many of us put, moisturizer on in the mornings, but we're probably like shouting at the kids to get ready, thinking about what we need to do for the day. And, as we're kind of putting this moisturizer on. But actually taking 30 seconds, a minute to just kind of feel your skin, just to kind of try not to have any other noise in your mind, and just kind of that tactile nature of putting moisturizer on. And it's one of those examples that we'll talk about when we come to talk about habits, of habit stacking. If you're in the habit of putting your moisturizer on, why not try and use that as a moment to just kind of recenter, both as you start the day, but also as you end the day. Soak up positive experiences. So many of us go through life and these wonderful moments happen, and we just go, yeah, that was great. I'm moving on to the next thing, rather than kind of really soaking in. And Faye's heard me talking about this because, I've said to her when she's had these amazing successes, I'm like, lean into it. Just feel how it feels to be joyful in that moment. Because again, we're imprinting those feelings in our brain, and we're going, oh, it feels really nice when I lean into those kind of joyful moments. I want more of that. So, leaning into and soaking up those positive experiences, really taking a moment and just thinking how it feels to be joyful and happy is really important. And equally, recognizing when our brain is kind of going off course a little bit and we might have negative thoughts coming in, being able to recognize that. Again, we become, the more we do that, the more we kind of press that pause button on the negative thinking, the easier we will find it to do that in the future. So as soon as you start realizing that little voice on your shoulder is creating a negative narrative, then just saying, hang on, I know what's happening here. My brain's going down that route of negative thinking. The more you learn to recognize that, the quicker and easier it will be to recognize it, and therefore to kind of stop it in its tracks. And then there's language. Language is so powerful. That monologue that we've got going on in our heads throughout the day, and how we talk about things that we do. And I've shared these in coffee mornings as espresso shots in the past, but just changing the narrative. And my favorite one of these is changing from I can't to I can't yet. And this was a one that my daughter's reception teacher taught her when she couldn't do something. She says, not that you can't do it, it's that you can't do it yet. And that small word has so much power because it changes us from having a fixed mindset, from seeing things as insurmountable, problems as impossible to overcome, to a growth mindset, which is the ability to see obstacles as things that we just need to overcome. And the power of that word, that reframing of that situation from I can't being a finite thing to I can't yet, which means I will be able to, just need to figure it out.
Someone's having a bit of a sing. I'm not sure who it is, but which is joyful and lovely.
It's
I'm
joyful.
really enjoying it, but you might want to pop yourself on mute.
That is beautifully joyful. So, oh, how are we doing for time? We're on half past. Okay. So I was going to talk briefly about continuous improvement mindset, which I think is a really good one for us as business owners. So I think I'll do this one, then I might give you a bit of an option around where we go from here. So, what is continuous improvement mindset and how do I tap into it? Does anyone know what I mean when I talk about continuous improvement mindset? Feel free to shout out or pop it in the chat. I'm not sure I can see the chat very easily because of the way I've got my screen set up, but maybe Faye can tell me if there's people in the chat. Let me know what I mean by
Is it little steps taking better than no action at all?
yeah, a little bit. It's about that kind of continuing to move forward. Yeah, absolutely. And seeing kind of yeah, incremental changes that you can make, that you don't need to necessarily think about the big solution. You're just kind of keeping that momentum going. And actually, there's this brilliant quote from Sir Dave Brailsford, who used to be in charge of British cycling. And this is so great. So he said, it struck me that we should think small, not big, and adopt a philosophy of continuous improvement through the aggregation of marginal gains. You might have heard him talking about this theory of marginal gains. Forget about perfection, focus on progression, and compound the movements. By experimenting in a wind tunnel, we search for small improvements to aerodynamics. By analysing the mechanics area in the team truck, we discovered that dust was accumulating on the floor, undermining bike maintenance. So we painted the floor white in order to spot the impurities. We hired a surgeon to teach our athletes about proper hand washing so as to avoid illnesses during competition. We also decided not to shake hands during the Olympics. We were precise about food preparation. We bought our own mattresses and pillows so our athletes could sleep in the same posture every night. We searched for small improvements everywhere and found countless opportunities. Taken together, we felt like they gave us a competitive advantage. And I just think that's such a powerful concept in that, especially as a small business owner, when you feel that there are so many things that you need to do that you could be doing on your business, and just that concept of marginal gains, of just looking at the small things, how can I make that process a little bit smoother? How can I spend a little bit less time doing that so I've got a little bit more time to do this? Those, and starting small, and thinking about progression rather than perfection, I think are really powerful when it comes to being a small business owner. So actually, what can we do? What can we take from this concept? Start small. So find those small things. Accept that we can always do things better, but we'll never do them perfectly. So that idea of progression over perfection. Celebrate your successes. So if you do make a change, if you do make those sort of marginal gains, then celebrate them. Have a go at things. Have a go at doing something different, because it's really okay to fail. And that is such a fundamental concept in this mindset, that it's okay to try things and to get things wrong. And having that mindset around actually failure is just growth, failure is just learning. Share learnings with each other, because what a great way, you're part of this amazing community. So being able to communicate and share your kind of learnings, I think is really important. And actually, this leads on beautifully to self-awareness. So I think that self-awareness is an absolute superpower. So being able to understand what's going on in our own brain is so, so powerful. So I talked about those kind of primers for happiness and being able to spot that negative pattern of thinking. And when we kind of adopt a reflective mindset and an ability to kind of look at our own mindset, look at our own patterns of thoughts and behaviors, and really lean into those to think about what's going on, that becomes a really, really powerful first step. Even if some of this stuff, some of the changes that you might want to make feel big or insurmountable, actually starting by just honing that ability to be reflective. So I'll give you a perfect example of something that's happened just today. So this morning, I was thinking about, how I was feeling because I do this often, I have that kind of constant question sort of buzzing around in the back of my head, how am I feeling? Okay, well, I'm feeling a bit anxious today. Well, that's interesting. So again, you're asking yourself these kind of coaching type questions, how am I doing today? And I go, oh, I'm feeling a bit anxious. And the other side of my brain goes, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. I go, well, I just feel, a little bit a little bit twitchy, a little bit sort of on edge. Okay, why do you think that might be? And I start thinking about my week, I start thinking about what's going on. Oh, well, it's quite a busy time at the moment. I've got quite a few different things going on. I've got doctor's appointments this afternoon that, should be nothing, but I've kind of got that in my head. I'm going to the dentist on Thursday. Don't really like the dentist. I go, oh, actually, do you know what? There's some reasons there why I might be feeling a little bit anxious. Like, oh, that's good. I've joined those dots for myself, and I'm starting to realize why I might be feeling like this. And I go, okay, well, what do I need to do? Do I need to do anything? Do I sit with it? Does it feel so kind of, do these feelings feel so strong that I need to do something about it? Or am I just going to sit with it? And I go, okay, well, maybe I'll try sitting with it and see how that goes. Is there anything else that would help? Would movement help? Do I need to get out and kind of move my body a little bit? Do I need to um, try and regulate my nervous system? Do I need to do a bit of breathing? Do I need to do a little bit of tapping? What do I need to do? And it's that narrative. So just kind of understanding that kind of monologue that was going on in my head this morning is a real kind of insight into what self-awareness might look like for you. So it's about curiosity. It's just about going, how am I feeling today? Okay, interesting. Why might I be feeling like that? Okay, interesting. Is there anything I need to do about that? Maybe, maybe not. What might that look like? And it's just that kind of coaching narrative that the more you do it, the more naturally it comes. I didn't even think about the fact that I was, consciously asking myself that question. I just skipped to, oh, I'm feeling a bit like this today, because that question was kind of so naturally in my brain. And that's what self-awareness can look like. And if we're thinking about trying to be more joyful, to live more joyfully, then having that ability to figure out what's going on and to ask ourselves questions with kindness and without judgment is a really, really important starting point. And actually, this is a great Aristotle quote. So, knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom, which I think is just such a beautiful, poignant quote that actually, it's about having kind of tools and techniques in your toolkit, but actually the starting point is just knowing yourself, because no two of us are the same. What triggers us, what makes us feel different ways is different for each of us. Equally, what works to kind of change the narrative or to change our mood is different for all of us. And actually, here are some things that you can do around kind of self-awareness and how you can use that as a tool for sort of challenge or change. So periods of challenge, periods of change that can feel a bit unsettling. By developing that sense of self-awareness, you can understand your needs and your conditions for success. So actually, when are you the flip side, and when are you at your absolute best? When are you in your flow? When are you doing your thing and doing it brilliantly? Understand that, start realizing what's going on. Is it time of day? Is it time of the month? Is it, what's gone on in that day where you're absolutely singing? And then you can try and replicate those things or try and manage your workload to when you work best. It helps deepen your understanding of your impact on others. So actually, as much as self-awareness is lots about kind of gazing inwards, it's also about understanding the impact that our behaviors have on others. So, we can start to do that monologue, that narrative with our interactions with other people. So we might have had a conversation with our partner or somebody in that we're dealing with in the course of business. It might be a client that didn't feel very good, that felt kind of a bit uncomfortable, and kind of being able to use that self-reflection, that self-awareness to go, okay, that interaction felt a bit whatever it is. Wonder why that was. What was going on there? And being able to ask that same set of questions can really help us with our relationships with others. It helps you identify your strengths and your areas for growth. So it makes you realize what you're really good at. So again, developing that sense of self-awareness, you go, oh, do you know what? I'm really great at X, Y, Z. But actually, do you know what? The bit that I'm not so great at, that I might need some help with, or I might need to come up with a different plan for, is X, Y, Z. It helps you deepen your understanding of your stressors. So those moments where those cortisol levels feel really high, understanding what's going on and triggering those, really important. Helps you develop your sense of curiosity. So those kind of coaching style questions, that ingrained curiosity is really fundamental to self-awareness. So learning the questions to ask and getting skilled in asking those questions regularly is really, really important. So we are at about 40 minutes in. I'm conscious that I want to talk a little bit about habit forming. So we can have a very brief foray into falling up, which is about kind of learning to manage failure better. Or we can have a little look at circle of control. And then the other bits I'm probably going to whiz through in order to be able to talk a little bit about habits. Does anyone have a strong feeling as to whether they would like to do falling up, so visiting our view of failure, or working within your circle of control? Feel free to pop it in the chat or put your hand up and we'll go with it.
We got falling up, falling up.
Okay, lots of people are saying falling up. I'm going with falling up. The majority. Okay, so falling up is the term that Sean Aker uses in his book when he talks about readjusting our attitude to failure. So we normally talk about falling down, but he talks about it in terms of falling up, which is really interesting. So another experiment that I do with people, which I won't do now, is I ask them to imagine that they're in a bank with a lot of other people, and an armed robber walks in and he fires one shot and you get shot in the arm. And I ask people whether they think that would be lucky or unlucky. And of course, it splits the room. Some people say, well, of course it's unlucky because, why did I have to be in the bank at that moment? Why was it me out of all the people who were shot? That sort of narrative. The other half who say it's lucky say things that you can imagine, like, it could have been so much worse. Other people could have been shot. I could have been shot somewhere, far more significant than in my arm. So that just shows you that we have different attitudes to unfortunate situations. And when the people who tell me that that was lucky, when they explain why, they're using something called an optimistic explanatory style. So when we choose to explain the nature of past events, we talk about adversity as being temporary rather than local and not global or permanent. And people with an optimistic explanatory style, unsurprisingly, tend to be happier. And all we're doing is when we tell those little stories about, for example, the armed robber, what we're saying is our own little set of counterfacts. So we're saying stuff that is our alternative perceptions of reality. So a more relatable one might be if you were giving a pitch to a room of investors. You're in there, think Dragon's Den style. You've got a table full of people who, and you're pitching maybe for some investment in your business, and they're all looking down. They're looking a bit distracted. They're looking at their phones. They're leaning back. Their body language isn't saying to you, I'm interested. I'm about to invest in you. How we talk to ourselves about that situation, we don't know what's going on for those people. We don't know what their reality is. The reality that we're seeing is that they're on their phones, but we don't know what's actually going through their mind. But because our brains have an inbuilt negativity bias, because we tend to lean towards the negative, and it comes from our caveman days, our fight or flight instinct, where we had to constantly be on the lookout for danger, we have an inbuilt negativity bias that tends to think worst case scenario. So we might come out of that pitch, or we might go, not going to get any investment. They clearly weren't interested in what I had to say. That guy in particular was just busy looking at his phone, and the lady over there, she was sort of playing with her iPad. If you had that conversation with a friend, so if it was a friend that had been in doing the pitch, do you think you would give the same narrative? Do you think you would say to your friend, yeah, they clearly weren't interested in you, were they? They were clearly a bit distracted. You'd probably come up with some more positive counterfacts. You'd probably say things like, do you know what? Think of all the reasons they might have been on their phone. They might have been taking notes, because lots of people these days take notes on their phones. They might be sending an email going, this woman is amazing. We need to make sure that we shout about here. They might have been looking you up on social media. They might have been connecting with you on LinkedIn. There are so many reasons that they could have been looking at their phones, but our brain tends to go to worst case scenario, but we tend to flip it when we are talking to someone else. So that's my advice to you. If you're in that situation, if your negative bias is running the show, pretend you're talking to a friend, pretend it's a friend in that situation, and ask yourself, what would you say to them? And we can use this little ABCD model: adversity, belief, consequence, dispute. So the adversity is kind of the bad thing that's happening, the person looking at their phone. The belief is, oh, they're clearly, distracted. They're clearly not interested. The consequence then is, oh, well, I'm not going to get my investment. So when you start realizing that that's the route your brain is taking, that's your prompt to dispute it and to do the friend trick and to pretend how you would be speaking to a friend in that situation. And actually, I love this Richard Branson quote: you don't learn to walk by following rules, you learn by doing and by falling over. And I think that's something that we can all remember, in all those kind of moments where you think that things are going wrong, that, things haven't gone to plan. Actually, we learn by doing and by falling over, and that is how we grow. So I'm going to whiz through, and we're not going to do circle of control because we're rapidly running out of time. And I want to make sure that we've got a bit of time for discussion at the end. A grow model, if you don't know about the grow model, look it up. Really useful kind of tool, especially in business, kind of thinking about how you might overcome a particular challenge. We're not going to talk about relationships as much as I would love to. We are running out of time. So I am going to go through and we're going to talk about, oh yeah, find yourself a well-being buddy. This goes regardless of it's in the relationship section, but actually if you want to do some of this stuff, you're in an amazing community. If you want to make some of these changes, then, like you would have an accountability buddy to get something done. If you want to kind of do some mindset stuff, get yourself a well-being buddy and kind of hold each other accountable to see whether you're doing making some of these changes. So let me talk to you about habits. I think this stuff is really important. So we talked about things like priming our brain and how we can kind of train our brain to become more joyful. But actually some of that stuff needs investment. We need to kind of make those changes more habitual. Things like finding the moments for mindfulness, we need to make them habits. So there are two things that we can do to help strengthen those neural pathways and to make things habitual. We can decrease the activation energy we needed, so the effort that we need to put in to do that thing. And we can also eliminate choice and use rules. So an example of this might be, you might decide, based on what we talked about today, that you are going to start writing down 3 positive things at the end of every day. What can you do to decrease the activation energy you need to do that? Well, you can put your notebook and your pen somewhere really obvious. So that might be on the chair that you sit in every evening. It might be on your pillow, so that you have to pick up the notepad and have it in your hand in order to be able to sit down or in order to be able to get into bed. You're like, well, I've got it in my hand now. So, how much more effort does it take to just write these things down? So rather than thinking you're going to do it and then scrabbling around every evening to find a bit of paper, put it somewhere really obvious. Eliminate choices and implement rules. So this means if you're deciding that you're going to journal and you're going to do it, every night, last thing before bed, then that is your rule. And therefore, you don't have to think about a time during the day when you're going to do it. You just know that that is the time that you're going to do it. You decrease the activation energy because you put your notepad on your bed and you've made your rule and therefore eliminated your choice in saying that you're going to do it every time before bed. And we can use this in so many ways, different ways that you think you want to, operate in your business. You might want to use it if you want to kind of practice your gratitude at dinner time. So you say, right, we're just gonna do it. We're gonna ask the same question every night because that's low effort. We don't need to think about new questions. We're just gonna ask one thing that we're grateful for, and we're gonna do it at dinner time. So the activation energy is decreased. It's not like you're going to think of a different question every day. You're going to ask the same question every evening. And your rule is there that you're going to do it at dinner time. And by doing this, we can make those things habitual. So habit stacking is the other thing that we can use. So again, that eliminates that element of choice. So whether it's being mindful while the kettle is boiling, well, you've already got your habit there because you're going to boil the kettle because you're going to have your cup of tea. So you're doing that anyway, and you use that then as your mindful moment. Same with putting your moisturizer on. If that's going to be your mindful moment, then you're already in the habit of doing that. So you've already done that work. You've already decreased that activation energy and eliminated those rules because your moisturizer's there on your bedside table and you put it on every night anyway. So that's you've nailed that as a habit. So all you're doing then is stacking on top of that, using that as your mindful moment. And very quickly, I'm going to talk about, so if you think about that slide at the start, which was changing your pocket, cash in the bank. So our change in the pocket is those moments where we're doing all this stuff in the background. We're doing the priming, we're creating the happy habits, we're doing that stuff, but actually we still feel like we're in a funk. And in that moment, we just need a little injection of joy. So what I want you to have a think about is what's on your mood booster menu. So when you're in that funk, what is it that works for you? And it's a menu because there's not one thing that's going to work for you all the time. Sometimes you'll need to pick something different from that menu. Sometimes choice A will work, sometimes choice B will work. Sometimes you can't do choice A or choice B because of the situation you're in, so you have to go with choice C. And these are just some examples of things that you might have on your mood boosting menu. You might want to write down some good things about your life because that moment of kind of gratitude and finding joy is really a nice kind of reset. You might want to watch a funny video. You might want to send a text to a friend or an email to a friend that you've been meaning to reach out for because we didn't have time to talk about it today. But relationships are our number one driver of happiness. That connection with others matters more, and it matters more than anything else. So actually finding that moment of connection can be really joyful. You might want to doodle or sketch. You might want to stretch. Some movement might feel good for you. You might want to meditate. Meditation does not require an app. It does not require absolute silence or darkness. It just means sitting and concentrating on your breath. And you can do that pretty much anywhere. So it's just, you might want to put your hand on your chest or on your belly to kind of feel that rise and fall. You might want to try and count your breaths because that's a nice way to kind of clear out the other thoughts, but it is not, you do not need an app, you do not need complete silence. It's again one of those lovely ways of just kind of lowering those cortisol levels during the day. You might want to think about something exciting that is happening in your future. So there's some research that shows that people who thought about watching their favorite film got as much joy from thinking about it as they did from actually watching it. So actually that kind of visualizing of something joyful that you're going to do can be super powerful. You might want to commit a conscious act of kindness. You might want to do something really small but really nice for someone, because that's a really lovely way to kind of get a bit of a dopamine boost. You might want to walk around the block. You might want to listen to an upbeat song. Your menu may have some of those things. It may have none of those things. It may have other things that are very personal to you. But have a think about what's on your menu. And the best advice I can give in these situations is, because people say, well, how do I know when I need to do one of those? Well, it's probably those moments where you're fighting against it the most. So if you are kind of in a bit of a funk and you think about an idea of, well, I could get up and walk around the block. I could just go and stretch my legs. If your brain is going, no, you can't do that right now. You're too busy. You're too busy. You don't have time to do that. We've got to crack on. That's probably your biggest telltale sign that that's exactly what you need to do. And we think about that kind of time as sort of a productivity deficit that when we take that 15 minutes, well, that's 15 minutes less that I'm going to have to get X, Y, or Z done. We don't think about it as, time being this kind of flexible, productivity being this sort of elastic concept. And actually, by taking that 15 minutes to go around the block, you might then, when you come back, have the ability to do something that might have taken you an hour and a half in an hour. So rather than losing 15 minutes, you've actually gained half an hour, or net result, at least 15 minutes. So have a think about it in that kind of context. Don't think about it as a kind of very linear equation that, if I go and take a break for 15 minutes, I've lost 15 minutes time. Chances are you're going to gain, and you're going to gain multiple. Okay, I'm going to leave it there because we've got about 5 minutes. I want to know if there's any questions. I want to know if there's any discussion, anything you want to pick up on. A little word about have a think about what you might want to ask. Um, just a little bit about the Happy Business School. So I go into organizations of all shapes and sizes. I deliver workshops, I deliver keynotes, I deliver consultancy around happiness and culture change. If you know any organizations that might be interested, then this is how you can find out more about me. But I would love to spend the next 5 minutes hearing what you thought, whether that resonated with you, and answering any questions.
Carly, that was amazing. Thank you so much. I think we all feel like we want to move in with you. Maybe that's just me. Love,
Yeah,
love.
thank you. That was brilliant.
Anyone?
I want my husband to hear all of it as well. Can he watch the video? I've made notes for him.
Yeah, well, I'll upload it and share the link. Do you want to take it off screen share, Carly? So
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
always nice. If anyone wants to put any questions to Carly, please do fire away. Now is your opportunity. Or it doesn't even have to be a question, actually. Sometimes it's just a takeaway. Lots and lots of those 1% shits. Lots of lovely comments here. It's really nice to see.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the comments. Yeah.
So thank you, Carly. And as I said at the beginning, these lunch and learn sessions, they run once a month roughly. In fact, I'm going to flick through my diary because I've been chatting to the lovely Sue Riches, who's here today from the South Devon Hub. I know we haven't got the title for your talk yet, Sue, but to get it in your diaries now, the next one, I'm going to skip April because it's so tricky with Easter. I'm going to go straight to May. So the next one's going to be May the 8th. So do pop it in your diary. And if there's any idea for a subject that you would like to hear, or anything that you would like to deliver yourself, let me know. Before we release Carly, if you want to say anything, please do. And it might be nice actually for Carly and for all of us. What's one thing that you're going to take away from today? Pop it in the chat. What's one thing you'd like to take away from today? Mood boosting menu. I like that one. That was gorgeous.
I think just thinking about it in that context is helpful. Yeah, we don't often think about having those kind of choices. We sort of instinctively know, but kind of being really intentional about it and even writing it down. Oh, and the dinner time discussion, yeah, I love it. It's such a lovely way to involve kids and kind of get them sort of trying to adopt that mindset and making things like, kindness and gratitude part of their language as well.
We've got, yeah, 3 good things at dinner time. Listen to the signs of when to pause. We've got thinking about what you say to a friend is absolute gold. Make some time for positive reflection with my family. Yeah, it's all lovely. Really, really lovely. Carly Cannings, oh, you're just gorgeously gorgeous. Thank you so much for that today. It's been absolutely wonderful. If anybody knows of any workplaces or any referrals you could make for Carly, we've heard how wonderful she is today, and we want to just continue to see her flourish as we want all of you to flourish. So do have Carly front of mind so you can, think about referring work to her. Gorgeous. Thank you for coming. It's been lovely to see you. Hope you had a nice lunch, and can't wait to see you all soon. Coffee morning tomorrow at 10:30 for those of you who fancy an FM fix then as well. All right, take care. Lots of love. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.